Good day. My name is Dave Scott, and my wife Carol and I appreciate your viewing our presentation about Yorkshire, England. The presentation today is similar to one we gave a year or two ago in the Wellness Center. Hopefully it will be interesting to both residents seeing it for the first time and those who saw it previously. In July of 1966, 4 Pan American Airways charter flights left Friendship Airport, now called BWI, with approximately 500 Marylanders who were going to live for 3 years in the north of England, specifically the town of Harriot. Carol and I were not the only COV residents who were on those flights. You may know family and friends who have made the same journey to Harriot, a place that is very special in our hearts and which we have continued to return to over the years. We went for a job, but it was more than that. It was an experience of a lifetime. We did not fly into the large airports around London. We flew to a U.S. Air Force base called Mildenhall. The airfield that was the famous band leader Glenn Miller departed from his plane before it crashed in the English Channel. From Mildenhall, we took a very slow-moving bus north to Harriot, Yorkshire, and what Carol and I called our second honeymoon. I don't think any of us expected to see and behold the beauty of the landscape of our new home. During the swinging 60s, miniskirts, the Beatles, guys with long hair, real Range Rovers, not the fancy ones sold today, TV sets that had the name Baird, which is my middle name on it, crazy clothes. There was also some TV shows. In the center on the right, there is a show that was called in England, Till Death Do Us Part. You may recognize, looking at the characters, a TV show that was in the United States called All in the Family. In reality, the latter US show was copied character by character from a long-running British show, as was many other British shows in the 1970s. But it was also a time for James Harriot and his books about life as a vet in Yorkshire, England. Before his death in 1995, James Harriot, who grew up and was trained as a veterinarian in Scotland, and who wrote a number of books that gave us the intimate feel of what it was like to be a vet in rural England. I encourage you to read his books if you have not done so already. In his books, his veterinary practice was located in a town with a fictitious name. In reality, it was a village called Thirsk, not too far from where we lived. It was a quaint town with a navigable stream and a cobblestone square. His practice was on the main road. It was called Skeldale House, and it is still a veterinary practice. He treated all sorts of animals, both in his office and for over 100 miles around Yorkshire. His office was on the first floor, and his family lived on the upper 2 floors. If you visit Thirsk, there is a blue plaque on the outside wall. It reads as follows: James Alfred Wright, 1916-1995, veterinarian, surgeon, and author of the James Harriot books. Lived and worked here. His stories and characters were portrayed in film and television as all creatures, great and small. Most of us have an image of James Harriot based on the actor who portrayed him in the TV show All Creatures Great and Small. This is the actual James Alfred Wright, alias James Harriot, in his elements caring for animals. The picture on the left is one I took minutes after the birth of the lamb. I combine it with a quote from James Harriot I love. If you have a soul means being able to feel love and loyalty and gratitude, then animals are better off than a lot of humans. James Harriot. In the next couple of slides, I'm going to focus on an area called the Yorkshire Dales, where James Harriot practiced veterinarian skills. The area in the circle is the Yorkshire Dales National Park. Welcome to the Yorkshire Dales, a place of rugged beauty. A place of dry stone walls that were built over 300 years ago. It has been calculated that if the walls were in a straight line, they would stretch from Washington, D.C. to Los Angeles, California. While the stone walls are extensive throughout the Dales, most of the Dales are moors or open land, where farmers let their sheep roam. One of the frustrations of driving in the Dales is meeting a flock of sheep on the road. They stand there and look at you and don't move, and don't move, and don't move. When I look at these farmhouses, I see James Harriot getting out of bed in the middle of the night and going forth to tend a sick animal. The Dales are a combination of fertile ground in the valleys and much less so in the hills. This picture is a great example of the difference. Look at the green in the valleys and the very dark brown, scruffy grass on the hills. Dotted throughout the Dales are very picturesque villages. These were both market towns and places for the farm workers to live. Notice the cobblestones and the flowers next to the houses and homes that have been there prior to the birth of the United States. The Dales are a popular tourist place in the summer, and the local pubs do very well catering to the tourists. But I'm sorry to say the tourists don't venture too far into the rugged parts of the Dales. This is a market town called Grassington, a very pretty town. I've spent many an hour sitting under that tree on the bench while my wife browsed the various shops. My visiting mother-in-law even had a blacksmith make her something. Another picturesque village with lovely spring flowers and ducks. And I want to call your attention to the grass. As in most of Yorkshire, it is cut like a golf course green, very, very short. And then they have a heavy stone roller on the end of the mowers to flatten the grass. They can do that because they get so much rain and not a lot of sun and it doesn't burn the grass. This is the view that not many tourists see in the remote parts of the Dales. Very narrow roads, and you don't see a lot of traffic. But it's worth the trip to see this rugged and beautiful land. One of my favorite pictures. A lonely building for animals to take shelter during nasty weather. Lovely stone walls framed by a very cold, cold stream. Stone walls held together by the skill of selecting the right rocks to place together. It's not just a bunch of stones thrown together. It takes skill to build a wall without concrete that will last for centuries. At my last house here in the United States, I built several stone walls. I'm not going to say they're going to last for centuries, but they've been upright for 15 years. A lot of the dales are covered by heather. Most of the year, they are scraggly and brown and ugly looking. But in late August, early September, magic happens, and they turn purple. And to see these gorgeous purple hills is just a sight to behold. The Dales are full of footpaths. The English love to walk. Most are not like the nice paved one here. Most are dirt trails. Like this one, hard to see, a narrow dirt path that is difficult to follow. To help, there are markers. Note the date on the marker, 1714. People have been walking this path since then. Also note the heather. Traveling in the Dales brings challenges. They don't build bridges over some of the roads. The streams run over them. My advice is, if you've got a heavy thunderstorm, don't try to go ford one of those streams. I have previously mentioned the roads are narrow. Well, sometimes they're so narrow you get in trouble. More than once I have met a bus coming the other way. I had a small Volkswagen, so I had to back up and let the bus go by me. But there's one thing, these small roads throughout the Dales, there are buses. Not one a day, but several a day. And if you're over 65 years old, you don't pay to go on the bus. Sometimes when you're driving, you encounter larger animals than sheep. This picture was taken from our car. When we saw the animals coming, we stopped and the cows went around us on both sides of the car. The amazing thing, they're being led to another field not by the farmer, but by two dogs walking next to them and directing them and working them without direction. During the warmer months, I'm sure James Harriot enjoyed driving through the Dales. But the colder months, they become very treacherous. But the sick animals still needed to be taken care of. Snow brings a different beauty to the Dales. Just as long as you can stay warm in your car, it's beautiful. The Dales experience a lot of freezing rain in the winter. The trees are a sight to behold, but driving is not fun on narrow roads in freezing rain. The wind. We think we have wind here at CLV. The average height of the Dales is about 1,500 feet above sea level. Between the North Atlantic and the Dales, there are no mountains to buffer the wind. When the wind blows, it is hard to walk, period. And as you can see, the trees bend over because of the hard wind constantly blowing. We're going to leave the Yorkshire Dales and visit a town called Ripon. We almost lived there in a house that was built in 1670 with its primary heat source being a fireplace. Needless to say, we found other accommodation. Outside of Ripon is a World UNESCO site called Fountains Abbey. It was built in the year 1135. At that time, it had over 600 monks who tended 30,000 sheep out on the moors. It was destroyed when the Catholic religion was banned by King James. During the fall, there is a sound and light show after dark. The music plays and the lights shine on the building and go on and off, and you can almost feel like the monks are still walking the grounds. A fantastic experience. It is amazing to me that in the 11th century, people could build and construct these structures by hand. Think about how precise it would be to build an arch just like these. We now move into the town of Ripon and the farmers market. You see these outdoor markets throughout Yorkshire on specific days. A great place to get fresh food. The population of Ripon is slightly less than the population of Westminster, Maryland. Yet it has a magnificent cathedral. People have worshipped and prayed on this site for over 1,350 years. The structure was constructed in the 13th century. Today, it is not very full of worshipers. Most are tourists that come to see the structure and to listen to its grand pipe organ. If you go to Ripon, there is one thing that you have to do, and that is go at 9 o'clock in the evening to hear the hornblower talk and blow his horn. Every night since the year 886, the horn is blown at 9 p.m. to signal the residents all is well and the night watch has been set. According to the legend, the blowing of the horn has never been missed in all those years. We now move to the walled city of York. As probably many of you know, New York was named after York. The history of York is the history of England. That is not an exaggeration. The city has passed through the hands of Romans, Saxons, Vikings, and Normans. It has been the scene of battles that helped determine the fate of an entire nation, and its rich range of architectural and cultural remains are unique in Britain. In the central part of York, it's known as the Walled City. There has been some sort of wall around York since the year 98 AD. The current wall was built in the 14th century. You can see York Minster in the background. At one point in history, the Scots were so hated by the English that they were permitted to kill a Scot inside the walls, but you had to do it with a bow and arrow. Today, to get into the old town, you have to pass through one of 4 passageways or gateways in the walls. This is the world's 4th largest cathedral, York Minster. Construction began in the year 1232 and was completed in 1472. In the 1990s, the area of the cathedral with the 2 towers on the left started sinking and leaning. A massive engineering task of excavation of dirt under the structure and filling it with concrete 100 feet deep was undertaken. It successfully rescued the cathedral from falling down. It is truly a magnificent structure inside. All I would tell you, the seats are rather hard to sit on for a long time. As I look at this structure, I am always amazed, even in the 14th century, how they were able to produce a building of this size and precise measurements. York Minster is famous for some of the most beautiful stained glass in the world. There are actually 7 stained glasses, or panels, shall we say. This is one end for them. Staying within the old city, we come to what's called the Shambles. Used to be meat cutters back in the 15th century. The architects in the construction of this were not very good, and the houses started leaning. Luckily, they stopped leaning, and it is a great place for tourists today. Onward to Harriot, our home for 3 years. This is Harriot House. If you are a Downton Abbey fan, you may have heard it referenced several times. If you saw the movie, there was a dance at Harriot House. We had the pleasure of passing it frequently. Harriot. We lived there and worked close by. A town that we had never heard of before 1966, but which we came to love. In the next few slides, I hope you see why. The first thing that you would notice upon arrival in Harriot is the large, open, well-manicured 250 acres of grass fields they call the Strays. They are so revered that their existence is mandated by an act of Parliament. They have existed since 1778. A place people picnic, play cricket, rugby, and soccer, or just sit and relax. We started this presentation by talking about James Harriot. If you read his books, he talks about coming to Harrogate frequently and eating at Betty's Cafe. Today it is world famous. The picture in the upper left is roast beef and Yorkshire pudding and what I call mushy peas. The picture in the lower right is some of the desserts and pastries that are offered at Betty's Cafe. I would warn you, though, they're almost pure sugar. Harrogate's economy is a mixed one. It has a lot of old money and some very expensive houses. A house like this sells for over $1 million. But it also has new money because it is a bedroom community for the towns or the cities of York and Leeds. The U.S. military base outside the town also brings a lot of money into the town's economy. Most of the Americans stationed there live in Harrogate. Harrogate is famous for its flowers. The city has a staff of a large number of gardeners and huge hothouses. When plants stop blooming, they are replaced instantly with plants that are blooming. The cherry blossoms of the trees along the Strays rival those in Washington. In the spring, the Strays are carpeted with crocuses. Crocuses, crocuses, crocuses everywhere. In some parts of the Strays, there are daffodils. Every year in Harrogate, there is a so-called daffodil convention where a grand champion is named each year. In Harrogate, there is a special place for us called Valley Gardens. It is special because before we moved into a house, we lived in a hotel for 6 months. That hotel is in the upper right, and if you look very carefully, you'll see 3 windows, and the 2 furthest on the left of the building are our rooms. From those windows, we were able to look out over beautiful valley gardens. Beautiful flowers from spring to October. I gotta tell you one thing though, we had a little faux pas. We lived on one side of the valley gardens and there was a laundromat on the other, and the only way to get clean clothes was to go through valley gardens, wash them, dry them, and bring them back. Again, when these flowers start to die off, they're pulled out and replaced with others. Springtime in valley gardens sometimes reminds me of Keukenhof, the famous park in the Netherlands. park has a little wading pool where kids can put their toy boats, whether they're motorized or sailboats. As I said, the English love their flowers, but almost equivalent, they love their animals and their dogs. They go everywhere with their dogs. This is some townhouses, very nice fronts on them, very nicely furnished. You wouldn't imagine they were built in 1858. Yes, that is before our Civil War. The Royal Baths. Harriot is famous for its mineral baths that people swear by for health reasons. The baths opened in 1878, and people still come around the world. I think it's because they like to get pampered. I don't think it's as much as going in the baths. This kind of maybe even ugly building holds a special place for us. It is the local movie house where Carol and I would frequently on Friday nights go to see 2 pictures. And prior to that, always have a Chef Boyardee pizza. One of the sources of income, besides what I've already mentioned, is conventions. Harriot has a very large convention center and thus has a number of hotels for the convention goers. This is the Majestic Hotel. It sits up very high on a hill overlooking the town. But I really like the English breakfast at the hotel. While Harriot does not have large department stores, it has numerous shops. Some of the shops are really from London stores. Remember, this town has a lot of money. It also has a number of antique stores and 2 large antique auction houses. If you come to our house, you will see a number of antiques we purchased there. You might be wondering what we did in Harriot for 3 years. Well, every day when we would go to work, we would drive out this road, A59, to the place that in the right picture has big golf balls. You now know as much as the locals do about what we did beyond driving there every day. Our home was in the area of Harriot called Coppice on Coppice Drive. This is what we looked like in the late 1960s, and that was our little car that we drove around England, Scotland, and most of Europe. Yes, that's me in the lower left, cutting the grass using clippers. For a while, we did not have a mower. We finally got a hand mower. Thank you. I appreciate you tuning in. I hope that you got a little bit of a feel for a place that is very close to our hearts. In subsequent weeks, Carol and I hope to present other of our presentations, and I hope you will tune in. Thank you. Have a good day and be safe.